Hi, guys. Welcome back to another The Deciding Factor podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Alton.
And today with us, we've got Barb again. And then, of course, we've got a special guest. But before we get to that, Alton, if you were to start up a business of your own, what's one avenue you might try to get the funding?
Just go broke and pull it all out of my savings, because why not? And credit cards, that seems like a good idea too.
Well, Stephen here today is actually going to talk to us about crowdfunding and how it worked successfully for him. And maybe we should or shouldn't consider that for opening up any of our own businesses going forward. So this can be very interesting, to say the least, especially if you're looking to start something up during these crazy times. Other than that, make sure you click like and subscribe to our channel. Catch everything that's coming your way. We did manage to talk Stephen to join us on a Deciding Factor extra segment. So can't say it's good or bad. You just have to check it out yourself. And guys, stay tuned, because this is the Deciding Factor.
Everyday life issues broken down to help you build your own opinions on the issues that matter most. Coming to you from Austin, Texas, this is The Deciding Factor with your host, Alton Hill and John Herzog.
All right, guys, welcome back. As I stated below, I have Stephen Wilcox. He's actually going to talk to us about crowdfunding, and is it a great option for everyone starting up a business of their own? Without further ado, Stephen Wilcox is a graduate of Chapman University in Orange County, California. After school, he began working with global action sports brands such as Oakley, Quiksilver, DC Shoes and Roxy, where he developed a fundamental understanding of brand building and the strategies required to authentically reach a brand's audience. Today, Stephen is the founder and CEO of PARKIT, which is an outdoor brand that wants you to get outside and enjoy the exploration. PARKIT's first product, an outdoor chair they called the VOYAGER, launched on Kickstarter during the peak of COVID-19. Despite the restrictions on outdoor activities, PARKIT raised over $500,000. I don't know that I could do that, but they've gotten that in pre-order sales in less than 60 days and is now preparing for their formal debut in 2021 and a direct-to-customer e-commerce brand. Man, Steve, I don't know how you did it, but I want you to tell me how. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Super excited to share the story with you guys and some of your listeners. Crowdfunding is certainly a new area for entrepreneurs to explore, and excited to kind of open up my wealth of knowledge to it and hopefully help a few entrepreneurs find a new couple doors for them to open as well.
Man, you know, we've talked about it on this show a few times about not having the funds to start a business, including myself. And one of the things Alton's always said is there's millions and millions of dollars out there. You just get it when you need it based on what you really need. But the problem I had was always, you know, there's angel investors, there's loans you can get. Never really looked at crowdfunding, or even if someone like me would even qualify, just the average Joe. So I guess let's start with you explaining to all of us here on the show, and then also those listening, what is crowdfunding?
Yeah, so a really great way to kind of segue that too. You already brought up the investors and angel investors and venture capital. Realistically, like when you're starting a business, and this is the kind of position that all entrepreneurs will face, especially if you're building a product or a software, something that really requires some level of overhead to really get the business off the ground, is you're going to need capital. Before crowdfunding existed, the traditional path was, hey, John, I've got this great idea. I know that you've got X amount of millions in the bank. Let's talk about this business plan. Let's talk about this product. This really solves a niche here, and I want to see if you'd be willing to invest in my idea, right? As soon as we have that conversation, we've got a couple things going against us as an entrepreneur. One, we don't have any revenue. So like our valuation that we're going to discuss with you, let's say you decide to give us $1 million to start the idea. we have no idea like how to actually quantify that into some sort of tangible business value. So that's step one. The entrepreneur is kind of in an interesting corner where he's going to have to relinquish a lot of power and decision making for that capital from a venture capital firm or an angel investor. Two, then you kind of have to start figuring out all the stuff that goes in the product design and how you're going to get your product built. And like you end up placing a purchase order with the money that you raised from your investor for a couple thousand units. You have those land in a warehouse here in the United States. You try to start selling them and you find out that the market does not give a crap about your product. And you go, great. We just wasted a bunch of time. We just wasted a bunch of money. And, sorry, John, this investment didn't work out. And so ultimately, what crowdfunding allows you to do, which is, I think, one of the greatest things for any entrepreneur who's looking at building like a consumer good product or something along those lines. I mean, there's tons and tons of categories people can crowdfund for. You can really crowdfund it if you wanted to, like a video project, you can crowdfund for, all the way to like a consumer good item, like what we have with our outdoor chair at PARKIT. But what's beautiful about crowdfunding is it lets you invest in the product design process all the way up to the prototype stage. And so you don't have to necessarily go have that conversation with an investor that says, hey, I have this idea. We need $1 million to get this off the ground. You can, if you've effectively saved a couple thousand, maybe you've got like 10, 15,000, really depends on the complexity of your product. You can invest that into exploring the design, getting it CAD modeled and getting a prototype built locally. And then you can use that prototype in your crowdfunding campaign to really test and see if the market wants that type of product. In our case, we invested a good couple $1,000s, basically my whole life savings up to that point, into the prototype. Just for some context, like I'm turning 30 this year, so haven't had a whole lot of chances to build a huge slush fund to go to market with. But had this idea sitting with me, and then my background is, as John mentioned in the intro, is with these brands where we were really focused on inspiring people and aligning businesses with these really important values that we want our consumers to share with us. And so always knew I was going to put something out there like that. And as we started to cater it towards this outdoor product, which was an outdoor chair, we're like, well, let's crowdfund this thing and see if the market responds positively to it. And the beauty of the crowdfunding versus a traditional route is that we've sunk in a lot less capital, and we've gotten validation from the consumers that this is something that they want. And thirdly, crowdfunding customers know that they're ordering a product that they're going to get 6 months, 8 months, 12 months down the line. And so they follow you through your whole process of like finding your partners and finding your manufacturers. And a lot of them start to open doors for you too, which is a really cool community that gets built around it. So when it comes down to crowdfunding versus the traditional path, like there's so many benefits to it, and we can dive into. I realize I gave a lot right there, but we can dive into a lot of the different segments of that and throughout our conversation.
I'm really interested in the beginning parts of this, because when you look at doing loans or getting an investor, one of the things that drives people crazy is trying to have a business plan put together in order to move it forward, right? I mean, there's a lot of work and effort to get into just preparing that sheet for them. So do you have to have the business plan nice and handy and ready to go, or what?
So we do now. We definitely didn't have a formal business plan. In the very early stages of this, like just to give some context, we're doing this podcast today in the January 2021. We launched on Kickstarter in May of 2020. We started the product design process in September of 2018. So we're a full 2.5 years into this thing. And we're just now having our product get on a boat and shipped over to the United States so our customers can start sitting in it, which is super exciting. But I can tell you 2.5 years ago, it was literally like 5 bullet points in my notes on my phone that said, design the ultimate outdoor chair, raise capital on Kickstarter, invest the money in Kickstarter into product and advertising, and turn it into a direct-to-consumer brand. That was literally like the notes. That was the business plan in 2018. And I like knocked a bunch of doors of like metal workers and woodworkers, like not knowing anything about product design or where to do it. And just kept being like, dude, you want to make what? And I'm like, we want to make a really, really epic outdoor chair. And they're like, yeah, you should probably talk to this guy down the street. So I like drive down the street and go to that guy. But like, oh my God, it was full on shooting from the hip. And now we have a formal business plan. But like the more the idea was we knew what the vision was going to be and we knew what that end goal looked like. And that's always been at the forefront of my mind in any of the decisions that we've made in terms of designing our product and building our brand. But at the end of the day, no, I was just shooting from the hip in 2018 and a lot of 2019, just trying to put all the right pieces in place. And then the plan starts to come together and it makes more sense. Those little documents can be really daunting, especially in the early stage, because you think to yourself, what's a statement of cash flow? You know, because you know what it is, but you're like, how do I build one? I don't even have revenue. So, I wouldn't say you have to have one, but you're going to want one at some point.
I mean, but there's not like a technical barrier to entry when you sign in on Kickstarter though, right? I mean, anyone can go sign on, but you just have to make your case for your product. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Kickstarter, and just to some of the people who are out there who don't know, I find this question, I tell people all the time, and we raised $500,000 on Kickstarter, and they're like, what the hell is Kickstarter?
Really?
Kickstarter is basically, it's the platform on the internet that allows for these types of programs and these promotions to occur. Anybody who's never checked it out, go check it out. You're going to find some really cool ideas. You can get behind a lot of cool entrepreneurs and even creators who want to make films and do other crazy stuff. Like there was a guy who did a Kickstarter campaign for an action figure. Just
nice.
Cool stuff. But Kickstarter will do due diligence on people who apply and bring a campaign to Kickstarter. What they're going to do is they're going to basically ask you a series of questions. You answer those series of questions. They're really basic. It takes like 10, 15 minutes to go through. But really what they're doing is they're going to take the answers from that and do their due diligence on you to make sure that you're a viable product that they could, like at the end of the day, you don't want to go on Kickstarter and do a whole fake thing and raise $100,000 and it turns out, oh, guess what? Nobody's getting anything. Thanks for the cash, guys. Bye. So that's the thing that Kickstarter's had to deal with in the past. So they go through a little bit of a vetting process, but at the end of the day, if you've got a core idea and you've got a foundation about like who your business is and what you want to do with it, Kickstarter for the most part will give you the thumbs up.
You have to have something to give in return is what you're saying.
Yes, you have to have something to give in return. And typically for a consumer goods person like myself, that's going to be the product. And what we're offering within Kickstarter is you're offering your product typically at a very discounted price too. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are giving you the capital to really build the idea. And so they're going to effectively have the best price on the market in terms of getting that good.
Huh.
So can I just way oversimplify it? Let's assume that I'm not an entrepreneur. Is this like GoFundMe for business? Like I have an idea, hand me money so I can go do it?
That's the most perfect way to describe it. It's GoFundMe for business. And at the end of the day, like it's there's a bunch of brands out there that I'm sure you guys may have heard of. Like there's Peak Design. Peak Design is a huge crowdfunding based company. There's a backpack company out of Utah called Wandered, has built all of their products with crowdfunding campaigns. There's tons of them that you can like go back and research and you learn about how they got their start in crowdfunding through Kickstarter or Indiegogo.
So they basically pitch an idea and people that hang out on places like Kickstarter are like outdoor chairs, dig. And so they hand you cash.
Yes.
And a certain amount, or they pick the amount, or how does that?
Yeah, so great question. And so the way that it really comes down to raising the money, like if you're a consumer and you go to Kickstarter and you come on the PARKIT Kickstarter campaign and you see our outdoor chair and you're thinking to yourself, this thing's awesome. How do I get one? Well, there's a couple strategies that you as an entrepreneur want to have in place for your consumers that allow you to maximize what you can raise. One of them is you have a little block that just says, this thing's cool. Donate as many like dollars as you want. Typically that's for people who like our chair retails for a little bit. Right now it's, I think $219.99. We initially started retailing at $149.99. And then we had the early VIP reward on Kickstarter for $139.99. That reward we had a limited amount of. And so like through that, you have these tiers basically that you're going to create within Kickstarter that have an element of scarcity to it. So the first 500 people can get the super early bird for $139.99. The early bird special kicks in at $149, and then the Kickstarter special comes in at like $170, right? And what you're doing with that is you're basically using that to get people to realize, if I want to get it on this at the best price, I have to get in on it now. Because if we sell out of these first 500, I'm going to have to pay an extra $10. If we sell out of those extra 500, I'm going to have to pay an extra $40. And so you create that tiered system basically to create a little bit of scarcity and anticipation within the consumer to want to act now and purchase. Does that make sense?
Yes, you like build fake supply and demand.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with
And
you.
I've also seen on some of those Kickstarter campaigns that they'll, like the VIP idea, so it's like you might get a chair and a shirt, and it's a limited run shirts, so it's like for the entrepreneur, they're like, okay, it's going to cost me $10 for the shirt, but it's a value add, or it's like a call with the CEO, or you also get included in this mastermind or their special newsletter. So, I mean, there's other things that you can do as well to build the value with your product, even though you don't have that product there yet, that I've seen too, which is pretty cool, right? It's like that exclusivity. And I think a lot of people who are surfing Kickstarter or these other things, they're looking to sponsor people and products that they see have a future. So, being part of that, like I was just thinking, now, like we're interviewing Steven, and then later we're going to be like, yeah, we interviewed that guy long before he ever launched a chair, so there's like that connection that you get when you're a part of that, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I've experienced, and like we'll get into like really what makes a great Kickstarter campaign. There's a lot of elements that go into what makes a really good Kickstarter campaign, and there's a couple resources that I've used. One of them was a company called LaunchBoom. They have a great email newsletter that if you're trying to start a business and you want to learn about crowdfunding, like they pump things out on their email once a week, and it's incredible content to just like read and absorb and be like, wow, this is a way that this brand did this, and this is how this brand did this thing, and it's all around crowdfunding in the crowdfunding space. But like the one thing that I can say, because I've worked on a lot of crowdfunding campaigns now in the last year, like people have hit us up and been like, hey, can you consult on this one? And I'm like, yeah, let's get in there. The difference between the ones that make it and the ones that don't are projects that have a passion and are projects that have like an identity. It's not just a product. Like at the end of the day, like at the end, I'm going to quote Wolf of Wall Street, but like, sell me this pen. Well, if this pen is just a pen, like no one cares. No one wants the pen. It's just a pen. They can grab the one in their pocket. But if you can build identity and value into that pen, and you can build some sort of like really, really like, authentic mission behind it, those are the Kickstarter campaigns that people get behind, because they see not just, hey, here's an entrepreneur with a product who wants to sell a ton of these and become bozo rich and drive a Lamborghini. like they see right through that. And like, it's a very complicated thing to like try and think about. But like as a consumer, like we want to know that the purchases that we're making, and basically we're voting with our dollars when we decide to purchase something. And the more and more that we've watched consumer habits change over the last couple of years, more and more of those votes with those dollars are going towards companies that people feel that they're a part of, that there's a community being built around it, that there's values that like, at the end of the day, like I don't rock climb. I'm not a rock climber, but I love what Patagonia does. And so I wear Patagonia. I wear this Patagonia vest almost every day in the wintertime, like we align ourselves with some of those brands and those values. And the companies that do really well in crowdfunding are companies that have products that align with values that people want to be a part of. And so you have to really like think about that foundation more so from like I want to say like an Aristotle point of view, where it's very philosophical, but then you make it tangible and people love that. Hope that made sense.
Yeah. So the part to this, obviously you have to have a decent product for people to really get into, but I look at this like podcasting. What are you laughing about?
You don't have to have a decent product. You have to convince them to engage with your idea for a great product, right? Like they have to have something you can believe in. Yeah. Okay.
But no, I think of it as podcasting, right? Let's take Joe Rogan, for example. He's been doing the same podcast for over a decade. Finally, he signed a deal, and now he's got millions and millions of dollars. But the problem is getting found. So what's the key to getting found, whether it's social media or whatever it may be, on a crowdfunding deal?
The key to getting found. So there's a bunch of different avenues there. There's a lot of work that goes into making sure that there's eyeballs on your campaign. If you don't have eyeballs on your campaign, like it's not going to work. I hate to be so blunt about it, but there's a lot of strategies that exist now that didn't exist as much as 6-7 years ago. When I worked for Oakley, we didn't have Facebook marketing or Google Analytics and Google ad marketing the way that we do today. Basically, marketing was a function of sales. If the sales team could sell eyewear and snowboard goggles and golf gear, we were given a budget to support sales. And everything we did was just like, let's do something cool that's going to garner a bunch of eyeballs and it'll support sales. And we didn't know if it had like a direct ROI. Like we were putting, one of the projects that I got to work on, which was an absolute killer project, was we got to take big screen TVs and convert them into snowboard goggles. And then we put a split down the middle of it. And so on one side of the snowboard goggle was like what your world looks like when you're snowboarding wearing these Oakley goggles. And on the other side was like, this is the bad light you get with our competitors, right? And so you got to like see these really cool things. And if you went into like Squaw Valley or Mammoth or a couple other resorts up there, you saw these massive things when you walked in to go buy your lift tickets. And you're like, damn, that's cool. Well, we couldn't actually calibrate like whether or not that had a huge impact on our sales. Like, yeah, we saw some sell through in the store. But now today, like you can put a photo, like for us specifically, we can put a photo of a chair on a Facebook ad with no background. We know how that performs. We can put a chair with a girl sitting in it with a dog. We know how that performs. We can put the chair in front of a mountain with a beautiful landscape with a sunset. No human at all. We know how that, exactly. You're going to have exactly John's background. We know exactly now how that performs. And that is something that from a brand building and a like a go-to-market strategy that has so turned kind of the advertising world on its head, that like as you're building these companies and you're building these brands and you're thinking like, how am I going to get my product? How am I going to get eyes on my product? Well, those dashboards of Facebook and Google and all of those companies, it tells you. You post that photo of your product and it's in front of a beautiful background and it's got a great landscape or something, and people start clicking that one versus the other one, give them that one. We need to create more of that. We need to do more of that. That's what we need to be sharing with people. This is what people are engaging with the most. You get that instant feedback that just has never, ever existed. And, that's something that's really cool and exciting.
So you spent a lot on Facebook ads.
Yeah, we did spend a lot on Facebook ads. We spent, probably a good grip of capital on Facebook ads to get our name out there, and that did play a huge role in it. Another piece of it.
You don't have to share, but how much did you spend on Facebook? Like, if you don't have to, but
sure.
I'm just saying,
you have to.
If somebody's thinking about landing, $500K in Kickstarter, what should they be prepared to spend in marketing in your mind?
I mean, I wish there was an easy way to answer that question. I get asked that question all the time. And when I was actually, reaching out to certain agencies to ask them questions about it, I always ask them like, what's the trick to $1 million campaign? And they basically were like, if anybody ever tells you that there's a trick to $1 million campaign, don't ever hire them. They're lying. And the reason why is because it's like, you could spend all of your money on Facebook, and there's this terminology in digital marketing called ROAS. And ROAS is return on ad spend. And so if you spend $1 and your ROAS multiple is a 4, that means for every dollar you spend, you make $4. So you make it easy, $100 product or $400 product. Let me back that up. If you spend $100 on Facebook and your product's $400, that $400 product is basically creating a 4-to-1 ad spend. You're making $300, right? And then further than that, you have your cost of goods and you have your overhead and your logistics and your shipping and all that other stuff. And then you're left with your profit at the end. When it comes to ROAS, you have a $400 product. You have to spend $100 in order for someone to buy that product. So you have that 4-to-1 metric there, and that 300 is your profit, right? There are certain companies I've seen that they're spending money on Facebook. They have negative ROAS, so they're losing money. There's other companies I've seen where they're doing an 11x. And so it really depends on what pieces of that puzzle you've put in place on the front end and what other strategies you have going. If we think of marketing and sales as like a tire, there's definitely spokes coming off of that tire, right? And that's one spoke's Facebook ads, one spoke's Google ads, one spoke's your email list, another spoke is your content and social and your organic Instagram, all that jazz. If you've got all those things operating strong, your ROAS is probably going to be stronger. If you're missing elements of that, your wheel's going to wobble and you're not going to have as smooth of a bike ride, and you're going to have a lower ROAS. But there's no real simple way to say, hey, raise 500,000 and do this. So that's kind of the challenging spot.
Now, I hate to surprise all of y'all over here, but I actually read a book recently, and
Jump back. Hold on.
I know. Don't have a stroke. Just hold on. The book was about getting my first 1 million followers, and it was actually he's got a smiley face. Yeah, and it was about just gaining these 1 million followers, and it was all based on Facebook ads is what he really primarily focused on. And like you said, he ended up using, say, the same picture for his book and then just changing the background slightly. I mean, you talked about 3 or 4 different ways that you did it, but you still have to figure out what gets the most looks, likes, and followers. There's just a whole lot into it. And I guess to add to that, is there a specific software you found that helped you understand the data from all of these sources?
No, not entirely. I wish there was like a one. If there's probably somebody working on a one fix all to kind of just see everything. And the best source that exists right now is Google Analytics. I personally think Google Analytics is a little bit messy. It's much better at tracking like the sale than it is at tracking the content. And so from Google Analytics, you're like, oh, cool, we're doing these things, we're doing these things, we're doing these things. And this is how we're seeing our results. This is basically like we did this and we saw this much revenue from paid search. We did this much revenue from organic search. We had this much revenue from influencer and affiliate. It gives you that pie, the good old pie chart. The best thing in terms of content is honestly Instagram. If you don't, and this is if you don't want to pay for things either. If you can start to tap into like your audience on Instagram and you're starting to look at it and you post 30 days straight, you can go into insights and you can see what got the most likes. Is there a trend that you can identify within what got the most likes? Is it something with words on it? Some brands, they only post things with a copy text on the top. That's what engages their audience the most. Some people it's video, and some people it's like for us, for PARKIT, it's a combination of our chair in the branded space, like basically like out in the mountains or out in the desert or out on the beach. And it's then like these really crazy photos of people just like living that adventurous lifestyle. If we post those 2 things, people want to follow us, people want to engage with us, people want to be a part of our mission. And at the end of the day, like that is what our brand stands for, and that fits into our brand ethos. But like you're not going to see us post a guy running around on a skateboard with a chair over his back in a neighborhood, because that's not our brand ethos. And our audience has also told us that they don't like that image. So you get to figure out all of that really simply in Instagram. Then what I would recommend doing is like taking what you've learned from Instagram and start applying that to some advertising dollars. Once you put those advertising dollars behind it, you're going to be able to like maximize the amount of data you're getting. Instead of having 1,000 eyeballs on it in a week, you've now got 10,000 eyeballs on it in a day. And you're going to get even faster response time of like, cool, kill that content. We don't ever want to shoot something like that ever again. We want to shoot everything that looks like this. And it allows you to really optimize a content strategy around what your community is engaging with.
So, okay, you're giving us, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so this is what you're doing all throughout like 2019 leading up to this campaign, is that you're researching, you're trying to understand, like, I mean, it sounds like you knew what your brand was, but you started putting things out there to listen to see how many other people would align with that. And these are all things that really you can do if you have the time and the knowledge, right? That you can do on your own to do kind of this brand research and product, just get more ideas from people.
Yeah, and a great book to read that kind of shows, just the struggle of entrepreneurship, but also like the heroism that comes with it, is the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. And there's a story that he brings up that like you really reminded me of there, Alton, with like just the idea of like the community tells you what they like. When Nike came out with Impossible is Nothing, they had no freaking clue where it was going to happen. They had no way to test it other than we bought a bunch of media space and a bunch of magazines and we did a billboard and let's hope this works. Like he talks about it, how they're like, they debated for weeks what they were going to put on these magazines. And then they just were like, just do it. And like, that's what came into like their mindset, was like the just do it, the impossible is nothing, all those things that we know Nike to be, they just kind of threw out there and had to just hope that the world liked it. And now we're able to like, all right, let's put our toe in the shallow end of the pool and we get really good feedback. Let's get our knee into the pool. We're getting really good feedback. before you dive in. And so in 2019, before we launched our campaign, to your point, like we started building our community. We started posting on social media. We started building our email list. We started engaging with the people who believe like we do, that living your life outside is like the best possible way to live it. And it really just kind of catapulted our vision of what the brand was going to be into the limelight for our Kickstarter campaign. So when we told people, hey, surprise, there's a product behind our movement, they were like, where do I get it? We're like, it's going to be on Kickstarter in a couple of weeks. And so you've built this community that's got this pent up demand. And that's where, as a crowdfunder, you can really, really capitalize.
You're up,
so
Barb.
Can I ask, this tons of really good information. My mind's kind of spinning. But the thing I keep coming back to is risk. Like you still have risk involved with this, right? I mean, you're still building the physical product. I totally track with everything you're saying about getting your community, finding out what your people really are interested in, and I guarantee that reduces some of the risk. I just keep thinking like, we just all got out of 2020, right? And stuff happens. So now you've got all this money that people gave to you for a product. What happens if that fails? What if the ship sinks, if the factory burns down, if coronavirus, whatever? Like, do you
trust me, those risks still exist. So the way that crowdfunding typically works is that they know that they're investing in the idea. And a lot of the people who are investing in crowdfunding ideas, I shouldn't say investing, but who are supporting crowdfunding ideas through those pre-orders, they know the different challenges that can come up. A lot of crowdfunding campaigns don't complete. There was one that is notorious. It was all over the news. It was called The Coolest Cooler. They raised over $1 million on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
The cooler had a Bluetooth speaker. It had an ice blender. It had wheels that were like off-road truck wheels. It was a huge campaign. The guy had to file bankruptcy, and the project's never going to come to life. And like at the end of the day, the people who not invested, I keep saying that term, I should stop. It's not the right term to use when it comes to crowdfunding because they're not actual stakeholders. But those customers won't see a return on that cash, and they won't see the product. And so that's kind of the risk that some of the consumers take. The risk that the entrepreneur takes is perfectly to what you said. Like we've just had the craziest year, I think, of any of our lives. And like one of the risks that, we don't account for ever, and we don't even think of it as consumers. We never think of like the journey that our products typically go on before they land on the shelf or they arrive at our front porch, thanks to Amazon. Like there's a whole manufacturing team that has to order the material from a supplier. They manufacture everything that gets loaded onto a ship. That ship has to bring it across the ocean, and then it has to go into port, and then it gets distributed to these warehouses, and these warehouses then are ultimately the ones who ship it off to the consumer. But right now, one of the biggest issues that's affecting global distribution is COVID, because what COVID has done, and like, classic economics, supply and demand, COVID and countries were basically ordering a crap ton of PPE equipment. And so that PPE equipment that was being distributed all around the world on container ships, basically to every country that was basically investing in it. We heard about it all the time, the amount of money that the federal government was approving to buy PPE equipment and face masks and gloves and all that jazz. Well, all that stuff is sitting in containers waiting to be opened in ports all around our country. And that's not just in America, that's happening globally. And so now what's happened in the freight world is there's a complete container shortage. And so people who are like, all right, cool, my stuff's going to get on a boat in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be in America before Christmas, and we're going to have that stuff in all of our customers' hands before the holidays. Like their stuff is still sitting in a port in the country of which it's manufactured because there aren't any containers. And so people are basically waiting in line. Imagine your favorite roller coaster in the middle of summer. You basically got to wait 4 hours to get on it. Just make that a business thing. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're sitting there waiting for our product to get in and strap in and go for its ride. There's no real sign of that changing. And what that's done from a pricing perspective, our initial quote for a container was like $1,700 for a 40-foot container, which is the ones you normally see on like a freight truck that, traveling across the country. Those same 40-foot containers right now are somewhere in the round of $8,000 to $9,000. And so that on a price per unit completely changes your metrics. Now instead of it being, a 30-cent landed cost if you're making like watches or towels, to $5 landed cost if you're making coolers and chairs, like that whole situation right there really eats into your operational margins and can be really, really detrimental to a business. But fortunately for us, like we didn't, I don't want to say we saw this coming, but we padded our pricing in order to make sure that anything that happened with COVID, we were able to stay afloat through it and keep the business going. And so far, so good. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be risk. You can't delineate all of them. And a lot of them are things that are completely outside of your control.
So have you thought about just switching to manufacturing containers? Because what I'm hearing is
I have.
that I could go on Kickstarter today and be like, I am selling containers. That'll be $18,000.
I can help weld. Like, I don't know how to do it, but I'll help weld.
No,
Right?
I actually was talking to a buddy of mine about this. One of my really good friends, he makes watches. It's called VOYAGER watches, and they've got some really killer watches that are great for, like, you can basically go surf in the morning with them and then walk into a business meeting and, like, you never would know that that watch was just in the ocean. That's just like their vibe of them. And he was like, yeah, dude, like, we're having to like change this on our watches and change this on our watches because this is the price thing that's happening with this and this and this and this. And then it all came down to freight. And I was like, well, you know that there's a freight shortage. He's like, don't you wish we had just like thought about how to just be the container guys? Because like that's a huge purchase order right there. Like, let's be the guys that solve that problem for the globe. So, you know, like that's the other thing. Those risk pose challenges, and those challenges are challenges that someone out there is going to solve, which if you look at that as an opportunity, that's a pretty awesome mindset to have.
So we're coming up on the end of our time with you fairly quickly. So we're going to do some rapid fire questions with what we have left. Are you ready?
Ready.
Do you have a pretty scary thought in your head when you've got a list of customers that already want your chair and you don't have it even built yet? Was that pretty stressful?
Yes, it was. We're through that stage now where we're basically just waiting to get on a boat. So that stress has alleviated itself. The new stress is, when is it getting on the damn boat? And so that's the new stress. But yeah, definitely. Like I remember us launching on Kickstarter. Our very first day, we did 75,000 in sales, and my best friend called me and he was like, how'd you do this? I'm like, what? He's like, you sold air. I'm like, what do you mean I sold air? He's like, these don't exist yet. These are literally just an idea. And people are this gung-ho about the idea and the mission behind your business and the quality of your product and what you guys stand for. Like, what is the thing here? I'm like, I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, like, God, we started getting on the call with our factories and our suppliers, like literally week one, starting to put together all the pieces to get that prototype, you know, to them and be like, build this thing and build it right. And we're super excited about it.
So then
But
my
you didn't
final
really do it in a day. It was 18 months, right?
I mean,
priming that campaign.
Yeah, priming that campaign was 18 months, getting the prototype like designed and kind of getting into what, you know, ultimately the product was going to look like and be like was also 18 months. So we started both those processes at the same time. And then the product, you know, just sourcing your suppliers and finding your factories and getting it all assembled and packaged and loaded into containers, that in itself has taken another 8 months for our first run. One of the things that's crazy to think about too is like Apple. Someone told me that Apple goes through their entire warehouse in 3 days for iPhones. So when you think about that type of like cycled inventory turnover, like they do that every 3 days, what we're establishing now as a startup business in 9 months. And so it really gives you perspective of the systems that those huge companies have in place to do what they do.
So
the goal is to get there.
My final question for you is going to be, give me the worst parts about doing crowdfunding, and then I'll pass my witness.
The worst parts about doing crowdfunding. This is a tough question. I'm really trying to think about like what are some of the negative effects we've had for crowdfunding, and for the most part, we haven't really had any. I think one of the things that I would say you could kind of classify as a negative is just the changes that occurred globally from like either currency based or, for example, the container situation. I don't know if that, like, I mean, if COVID wasn't a thing, are we still going to have the container situation? I don't know. But, you know, at the end of the day, like the amount of time that can occur because you're using the capital that's given to you versus the investor can be a little bit longer. And I think that could be one of the negative drawbacks. But at the end of the day, like you as the entrepreneur, I think, at least I would always value the ability to look at an investor and say, we did this many sales this fast with this marketing budget. This is what we anticipate we're going to be able to do next summer, next holiday, following summer, the following holiday. Do you want to be a part of what we're building? Because now you have that behind you of saying, we have these early adopters, we have these advocates, and we have a supply chain built. instead of, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast, hey, John, you've got a bunch of money. You want to give us some money for our project? Like you're able to have that negotiation, and the ability to have that negotiation with tangible data is just so powerful as an entrepreneur in terms of you steering your business where you want it to go and doing it the way that you wanted it to be done.
I will say, if you could go back and do this crowdfunding campaign again, what's the one thing that you would do differently?
I would get a magic 8-ball, go in the future, and I would ask if anybody was eating bats in Wuhan. If the answer was yes, I would say, holy crap, we got a storm ahead of us, everybody. No, there's not really anything I would really change other than the fact that now that I know what when you start out, you don't know what you don't know. Now you know what you don't know. And if I could start it over again, I think we'd just do it a lot faster. I think that's the difference. Is it would just be like you are taking a risk with every decision that you're making, and you may not know what the result of it's going to be. And so you really think about it and you analyze that because you want to make the right one. And now that you have experience, you've walked the path. I think what we took us 18 months to do, I think we could do it probably in like six to 9 months, which in terms of getting our product to people, we'd all be sitting in chairs during this interview instead of waiting for them to get on a boat. So
yeah,
that's really the only thing I would say.
You didn't deliver our chairs before the show. I was kind of down in the dumps, but
So Steve, just one more like side question on that last one. Do you think that you could do it in 6 months now because of your experience and your confidence? I mean, is that what you're saying? It's like, because you learned this, now you have more confidence to make the decisions faster, and so you could have done it faster before?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of like, it's like the first time you use a knife. Remember how the first time you used a knife, your parents were like, be careful, don't cut your fingers, be very
what?
Yeah. And then, I'm sure we could go outside right now and grill a steak and come in and like chop it up for tacos, and like no one's going to even think about how fast they're cutting because we've been doing it for so long. And so like with all these things that we do in our lives, like we're basically establishing new habits. And the first time you do it, like it's very thought about, it's very cognitive, it's very one foot in front of the other, like learning how to walk. But you got to walk before you run. And in the instance of starting a business, you really got to crawl before you walk. And that's really the biggest thing that I would take away now, is that we could probably do these a whole lot faster. And that's the goal, is to ramp it up and get to an area where Apple's flipping their stuff in 3 days. That's insane to think about, considering the path that we've walked the last 9 to 18 months. So,
well, I'll tell you what, Steve, I did look up some statistics before you came on. I don't know if you are aware of this, but the average crowdfunder only pulls in about $33,000. So you are one of those phenomenons that went above and beyond. So congrats on that one, man.
Thank you very much. I have heard a similar statistic. I don't remember where I heard it, but at the end of the day, I'm telling you guys that if you want to start a business and you want to crowdfund it, sign up for any of those crowdfunding agency newsletters. They will give you so much gold. And we used a lot of those strategies and a lot of the things that they gave us. And, it's been an exciting journey, and we're super stoked to have all the support behind the business that we've had.
So if someone didn't have a product and they had just a regular business, like marketing, like Alton does, could you still use crowdfunding?
So that's a great question. Service-based businesses, I would say no, because there's not a big trade-off for the other side. At the end of the day, if we were to treat Kickstarter as a store, and what kind of store would you go in there to buy stuff? It's kind of like a Toys R Us. Sad RIP Toys R Us. But that's kind of what Kickstarter feels like. It's what when you're shopping on it, like there's everything you can think of, and it's all fun and exciting stuff because there's all these brand new ideas. When it comes to service-based businesses, like being a marketing consultant or a photographer or something along those lines, it's a little bit more challenging. Like you're dealing with a global community. For example, like we have customers in Europe, we have customers in Asia, we have customers in Canada, thanks to crowdfunding. Figuring out international logistics is a challenge that I also did not anticipate, but our marketing and our messaging connected with people in those countries, and they wanted to get behind our product. So, but at the end of the day, like that service world, you can't necessarily support that. And so it's a little bit tricky on that end. But if you've got an idea for a product, or you've got an idea for a film that you want to make, or you've got some sort of a thing that you just want to, stick on the wall and see if people like it. It's a great way to see if it's at least worth pursuing before you invest your entire life savings or ask an investor to get into the project with you and get that validation that ultimately the market's going to decide winners and losers, and Kickstarter helps kind of discern some of that.
Well, Stephen, it sounds like you've got your head wrapped pretty good around all this crowdfunding. I guess because I know how to get a hold of you, but if our listeners want to reach out to you, find out more, or even look at your products, how can they do that?
So the best way to get in touch with us at PARKIT is to go to our website, parkitmovement.com. We've got a contact page there with a little contact form. Fill that out. Those emails get kicked to our customer service rep. Depending upon the nature of them, if it's crowdfunding oriented, they typically come back my way. Then, if you're starting a business and there's ways for us to partner up and do some cool promotions and whatnot, we want to hear about them. So reach out to us that way. If you wanted to go check out our product, it's also on parkitmovement.com. It's called the VOYAGER. It is the ultimate outdoor chair. It's got a cooler built into the very bottom of it that can hold ice for 8 hours, and it has volume for 12 of your favorite beverage. And it's also got a cup holder that's sized for cans, canteens, and coffee mugs. And so we really, have put together the best seating experience for the next time you're sitting around a campfire.
Nice. Well,
Awesome.
I'm supposed to go back over to Alton's house because we never got to do s'mores that one time. So maybe we'll give our review of your chair after that takes place.
Oh, sounds good to me.
All right, Stephen, thanks for joining us. We'll stay in touch, and you enjoy the rest of the year.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
All right. Best of luck.
All right, guys. So that was Stephen Wilcox about crowdfunding. I tell you what, there's some interesting things he talked about. I personally think I would freak out knowing that I've got $500,000 that I made off of a chair that doesn't exist yet, and thinking, oh man, I've got to fill this order as soon as possible. I mean, that's got to weigh on you mentally, right?
I mean, I guess I've worked in a bunch of startups where that's what we did. We had an investor with an idea that we're solving a problem, and you just have to do it. And so I guess for me, that wouldn't bother me because I'm familiar with supply chain, logistics, manufacturing, and all of those types of things. And especially like high tech stuff, saying that we can do something that is kind of like, well, we've got a prototype. So for a chair, I'm like, well, a chair isn't complicated. Maybe getting the perfect chair, takes some work. But I think that that's really exceptional what he did. And I think, listening to him, I heard a lot more about quality marketing than the product itself, and so I think that, I think getting people interested and coming up with a design is the hard part, and so, but once you're ready to make it, other than it's COVID, you should be able to manufacture a design pretty easily.
When looking at some of the statistics, though, it's like fewer than a quarter of all crowdfunding, they're not successful is what I've found out. And then we talked about it. You, on average, will only gain about $33,000. Is that really enough to start up whatever product you want? Not to mention, it sounds like you have to have a product. It doesn't really work if you want to start up a service-based company.
Well, not just a product. You have to have an idea that someone wants to be associated with. And that's probably the part that I thought the guy is amazing. I mean, the stuff that he's done in theory, I guess the chair doesn't actually exist yet, but in theory, like, it's amazing. It just struck me like you couldn't get into crowdfunding without getting into all of it. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to be able to be willing to be someone that your life is somewhat centered around likes and clicks and people feeling, philosophical attachment to your product. Like, I think there's a part of me that feels a level of exhaustion just listening, because it's like, I would like to just have you say, my chair's better than Bob's chair. Buy my chair because it's better. But we can't.
Well, but he's charging $200 for a chair.
That's like a cooler and a cup holder. I don't get it. But well, like I'm not, you'd probably get it if you had to backpack. I don't know. It's something that to me, there is a part of me that really would love to see a business that actually just made a better product and sold it to me that way. And so I think some of this feels hard for me to relate to as a consumer. Like I can't imagine throwing money at an idea. There's so many shoes you could buy, like, and they're real.
I mean, but there's a lot of money out there. Apparently, there's like $84 billion was given out through crowdfunding in 2018. And now they're expecting to do over $110 billion in crowdfunding this year. So there's obviously money out there. The problem is did you know that there's also a third of Americans don't even know what crowdfunding is?
Yeah.
I think that, wanting to be an early adopter is definitely a thing. Not for everyone, but there are people that they have to have the new model of everything. They want to be a part of something cutting edge. And I think too, and I could be wrong, but reading a lot of the statistics about millennials is that they want to have a purpose in life and meaning. And so for them to just go down to Walmart and buy a chair that was made in China may make them, or any of us, just kind of feel empty. Like it's not a big deal. Yeah, it's cheap, but there's nothing special about that. Mm-hmm. But when you have a story to go with it and you're an early adopter, and and some of these things will change the game. Some of them will fall flat, but like think about Yeti. I mean, how long has Yeti been building Yetis? What is it, a decade, 2 decades, maybe? I don't know, 15 years. And it's just totally revolutionized the cooler space. Before it was like, go spend $4 on a cooler. And now it's like, if you don't spend $400 on a cooler that keeps ice for 10 years, like, what are you doing? Is that even bear proof? Right? So you don't really need that. But now I'm like, yeah, look, I'm going to wear my Sitka vest and have my bear proof cooler. And what are you going to do, like with your igloo there?
You're like, I'm going to leave it for the bear and I'll be leaving would be the point. Like,
I mean, I hear what he's saying, and he's definitely been successful. So I think that if you want to run a successful crowdfunding campaign, he's a good guy to listen to and talk about that. That's going to differentiate you between you and the other crowdfunders and, the Walmart chairs or whatever.
Yeah, you're right, though. That's a thing that I've been reading studies about, too. And it's becoming, man, I just must not be sleeping very well. It's becoming kind of more irritating to me, where it's like, it's not enough for me just to buy a chair. It's got to be a chair that also teaches retarded children how to play soccer. Like, it's got to be something that has this great purpose in the world. And sometimes making a good chair, I think, is enough purpose. But if you're going to crowdfund, I think you have to be saving something or creating a lifestyle that people really want to be associated with.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about, like he and I were both wearing vests, and he's wearing a Patagonia vest. I'm wearing a Sitka vest.
So y'all are best friends?
Heather has a Patagonia vest. Okay. So I'm prefacing that I'm not like anti Patagonia, but they're extremely political. If you're not caught up with Patagonia, they're all about like regularly posting on social media about everything political and how they feel about it and who's right and who's wrong. And I'm thinking like, I like your stuff. I don't care what you think about who's in office personally. Yeah. But I think, and talking to Stephen, like that's something that is a big deal for him. He's like, he wants to be a part of someone who's going to stand up not only and make awesome stuff, but also, let the world know where they stand politically. So, I mean, that's cool. I mean, when I wear this, I'm like, yeah, people think that I spend time out in the woods,
No, the ones that I hate are like, I would like to have permission as a consumer to buy something. Like I don't buy Patagonia on purpose because of that. Like I don't really want to be lumped in with that, right?
Sure.
It's like I have to stop buying Ben and Jerry's. Doggone it. I wish that some hyper conservative Calvinist would make really good ice cream, but they don't. So it's like
What
I
about
don't.
Bluebell? It's made in Texas.
Yeah, it's
But I don't know their
Oh, fish
political
fish food, man.
beliefs.
Like, yeah, that's the thing. I like not knowing sometimes.
But I'm okay
And
with
so,
that too.
Anyway,
Yeah, you just run the risk of that. But I think that just in business in general, everybody's got to have their unique selling proposition. And if you give someone a great product and meaning, then that's going to beat just a great product every time. So I think that that's when you're going to see the big winners in any business. And I think, from what I heard from him, this is a whole marketing campaign. It's not just go put your product on a crowdfunding page. Those are the people who are getting 10 grand, but the people who really put it all together and they're patient and they have a plan and a strategy and they launch and then they sell $75,000 worth of chairs, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's do the deciding factor.
Let's do it. Play the music.
Now it's time for our deciding factor.
Okay, so the question is crowdfunding a good option for everyone starting up a business? Well, let me start out with the good news. If you want to invest in something, there's over 185,000 options on Kickstarter right now.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
There's so many.
There's way too many. Here's the downside for it. We talked to him about it. It sounds like a great option in certain situations. If you have a service you want to sell, it's a horrible option for you. It almost disqualifies you, in my opinion. If you have a product, you could put it on there, but like I mentioned, the average you'll make is $33,000. Is that enough to do anything for your company or your product? Maybe. Depends on what it is. Here's the bigger problem. It seems like whenever you really want to do something big, it really ends up leading towards your marketing ability. Because even if you put your item up on Kickstarter, you've got to get noticed. It's just like this podcast. If you don't share this with your friends, we only get to have you as a listener.
which we like. You're
Which
nice.
is great. And we love you. Thank you.
Yes. But if you bug your friends and family to listen to it, then I get more listeners to have laugh at me. I mean, it took a while to get my mom to listen, but she finally started listening. Hi, Mom. But the point being is you can put this up on crowdfunding. It might do something for you, but you will not succeed unless you find out how to get this in front of more people. So you're still going to have funding. If you look at that book that I talked about earlier, where it was how I got my first 1 million followers, well, guess what? He spent around $8,000 to $10,000 on just Facebook ads alone in order to get noticed. That's not a lot of people have that money just lying around, especially in a pandemic. However,
credit cards.
Yeah. If you can do it, But the point being, it is an option and you should look into it. The likelihood of it working for you, I think, is very slim. So therefore, I'll say use it as an option, but I don't think it's going to be some big revolutionary thing.
Do you know that you've mentioned a book that you read twice in this episode?
I know. It doesn't make
Does
me look smarter?
I feel like we should have been taking shots every time you mentioned the book. Like,
Book, the million.
what? But he read. Yeah, that was big.
These glasses make you look smarter. See, look, instantly smarter.
Boom. Wow. That's incredible.
Eye candy. If
I
you're listening, sorry.
You can take our word for it. Yeah, I'm going to say the only way that this would be what I would encourage a small business entrepreneur to do is, if the business that they really wanted to get into is marketing, kind of the same thing that you're saying, John. Like, I think that ultimately, if you have a great product idea, you're probably going to build a more stable company over the long term if you do it, do it as you have the money to do it. So don't start global, start local, start in your community. But I mean, I'm aware that I have a major bias here. Like, this is coming from, to me, the idea of having to go into marketing if what you want to do is make chairs sounds exhausting. I just think you got to be clear about what you're getting into. It does sound like if your dream was really to be a marketer, crowdfunding is probably a great way to get into it without having to get a college degree.
So wait, are you saying you won't use it for your hot dog stand?
I will not. You know what I'll do? I'll build a hot dog stand and just like stand like one. I don't know. I think maybe I listened to too much Dave Ramsey over the years, but I'm like, start with the card table in your living room, right? Like, start with what you have and connect with real people around you so that it builds from there. Because even though I know that you don't have to pay this all back if your idea fails, in my mind, it feels like indebtedness. Like you're going to build your business on, all these people have given you money. And if you fail at it, like if something happens or it just turns out to be an idea that the market doesn't want, I think I would feel like I had all this money that I kind of had unfairly. I don't know.
So
It would bother me.
so at least we could come up with the idea for the hot dog koozie.
Yes, we could. And I hear that there's a chair that you could, sit in while you ate the hot dog.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that y'all are kind of poo-pooing on crowdfunding because I think it's a great idea. I think y'all are nuts and not looking at this the same way that I am. So, okay, you have to be a marketer. Number one, we heard all the marketing jargon from the guy who is the marketer. You don't have to be a marketer. Turns out there are companies that will market for you. Yeah, you're going to have to pay them tons of money, but they can help you put together these campaigns.
What's the name of the one you know?
Marketer. Evlosdigital.com.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so yeah, it turns out also if you want to launch a product, it's going to take money. It's going to take risk. I think anyone who's going to launch a business knows that there's going to be risk inherently involved with that, and it's going to take capital. Like if you just want to launch a social media company, you need a camera and a laptop, right? Or maybe a phone. Maybe you could do it with a phone. So the startup cost is going to be a new iPhone, whatever, $1,000 or something. But if you want to start a huge fishing tackle box warehouse, it's not going to be the same. The startup, the barrier to entry is higher. So if you have a large amount of capital that you need, you either have a credit card, like a father-in-law or something, or an investor, or crowdfunding. So I don't want to owe my father-in-law. Credit card rates are high, and an investor wants my profits. Crowdfunding doesn't, right? Crowdfunding wants my product. And so I think that for that reason, from the entrepreneur business owner perspective, it makes a whole lot more sense to use crowdfunding because people aren't taking a piece of the pie. You're actually finding your customers through here. And so to me, that's what you need. First, it's the chair. Yeah, you invest all that money in the marketing and whatever, but then he's going to come out with that koozie that matches the chair, or the backpack that goes on the chair, or I don't know, whatever it is. That's like the next thing. And he already has customers that he can go to. The other big thing that, so I was familiar with crowdfunding. One of the things that he said that really blew my mind that I hadn't thought about was how much brand building goes into the crowdfunding campaign, a successful crowdfunding campaign. And not only that, but building that community, that ecosystem of people and that culture of connecting with your customers, clients, whatever they are. How do you do that with an investor or your father-in-law? I think that or a credit card. I think that is a huge thing that crowdfunding can do, is help you build that community that's really, in my mind, going to take, if you do it right, your community is what's selling your product now.
So,
right?
so you're doing option C, basically. You have the money to do what you need to do, and yet you use crowdfunding to get noticed more.
No, I'm saying that everything is going to require some amount of money. Crowdfunding is the way, to me, I see it as leverage, right? So if I have to spend $15,000 to come up with a prototype and pay some marketing company to, do this research and evaluation and Photoshop the chairs and all of that, that's limited my risk of just going to somebody and saying, hey, I need $1 million. And he's like, for what? And you're like, well, I don't really know, but I'm thinking about, right? So you invest a little bit, and now you have some ammunition. Now you have some knowledge and some data and some people that you've connected to that you can double down and run that campaign. And then boom, now you got whatever, 10 grand, 75 grand. But these are customers now, right? They paid for the product that you wanted, or that they wanted, that you wanted to sell them.
Yeah.
So I think that's so much better than just finding some guy that's going to give you money. Because if you're starting a company, you have to have money, or you're just going to be playing small. And when something happens, if you don't have any plan for that, then yeah, you'll be the credit card person, I think. So I like the idea, and I like the planning and optimizing of it. And I think that's much better than, like I said, hitting up the investor again for round 2 of your funding after you burn through all of his other cash. Be better to do another crowdfunding campaign. I think the world's a lot closer now, and it makes so much more sense to me.
Well, I mean, if you can't make it on Shark Tank, that could be another good way to get and build a story of your own that's very unique and get out there and put that on social media. So, all right, guys. Well, this was good. I think I learned some things. I still don't know what to really think about it all in the end. But it is up for you to make your own decision on this topic, as well as any other topics we cover throughout our shows. Make sure you catch.
I thought we were forcing our opinion on people. They had to agree with this, right?
Yeah, sorry. Y'all have to agree with me, and don't worry about what Alton says.
So, on the
listening,
second
y'all.
show of the month.
Yes. Don't forget, our shows air 6 a.m. every Monday. Our extras not only air on Thursday at 6 a.m., but we've been plugging them at random. Make sure you also subscribe to our channels, because in the near future, you might be able to be a part of one of our live recordings, which means you can see all of the idiotic things I say and then edit out later to make myself look smarter. But other than that, guys, we appreciate everything. We love that you are now speaking to us, sharing those horrible photos to Barb that we get to laugh at. And we hope to see you on The Deciding Factor. Everyone, say bye.
Bye.
This has been another episode of The Deciding Factor, giving you food for thought on real life issues. Be sure to click, like, and subscribe to this podcast, as well as all your big social media outlets, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to check out our website at thedecidingfactorpodcast.com and give us comments and feedback. Until next time, stay safe and remember to keep an open mind.